Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to score 760 on the GMAT. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting me in this webinar is Sandeep, who's a GMAT strategy expert, and he's going to be your co-host. Before I formally start the webinar, I want to thank each one of you for joining me today. I know many of you have joined me from Asia, and the pandemic is raging in Asia. I know you've family members to take care of. You probably have your loved ones who need your help, and the fact that you're here during this time means a lot to us. And I'll try my best to make it worth your time. For those of you for whom this is your first interaction with e-GMAT, we have a fantastic free trial. We have lessons in every topic in the free trial, starting from number properties to algebra in quant, actually even geometry as well. To essentially sentence correction, critical reasoning, and reading comprehension. Again, we expose about 4 to 5% of our learning content outside. So definitely try those lessons out and see if this is a learning style that suits the way you learn. And the 4 lessons that I've listed over here are 4 out of the 30 odd lessons that we have. So those are the ones that I recommend that you start with. With that, we also have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free geometry webinar that's tomorrow. Again, we actually tackle a very small topic in geometry, but we take it from the very basics to solving 700 level questions. Through this topic, we kind of lay the foundation of how to tackle all of geometry. So that's tomorrow, 24 hours from now, and then a week from now, we have a sentence correction webinar. e-GMAT pioneered the meaning-based approach about a decade back. We're in that 3rd generation of that approach, and in this webinar we outline what that approach is and how do you go about applying that approach to some of the most challenging questions. So that webinar is a week from now on 22nd of May. You can click on this to register for the same. And then we also have our MBA analytical series in which we kind of educate you on how people got into top B schools. And next week we have a former e-GMATer Ekta, who's an alumnus of Kellogg, and she went from a career in IT to a career in product management. She's going to talk about how did she go about achieving that. Actually, she's going to start from how she prepare for the GMAT to positioning her candidacy at Kellogg to transitioning into product management, and she's right now a senior product manager. So again, you can register for that. These are things that can help you see through your application, plan for it, and these are people who've done it, who've been there, who've gone through the interviews. They understand what it takes, and they can tell you what are some of the pitfalls to avoid and what are some of the best practices to inculcate. All right, with that, let's kind of get to know you guys a bit better. I usually ask a couple of questions to kind of understand the makeup of this group. I have about 250 students right now in this webinar. And the 2 questions that I usually ask are, when do you plan to take the test, and what is your target GMAT score? Okay. All right. So when do people plan to take the test? We have a majority of the class who have not taken a date as of yet. About 160 of you. We have then the next biggest segment is those who plan to take the test in 46 to 75 days. The next big segment is 31 to 45. That's about 12%, so half as many. And then we have about 7% of the folks in that 0 to 30 day bracket or so. And then the target GMAT score, again, a majority in the 730 to 750 bracket, about 51% of you. A very good number in about 760 or higher, and then about half as many in the 710, 720 bracket, and about 1% in that 600 to 700 bracket. Thank you very much for that feedback. With that, let's go right into the webinar pane. And as I go into the webinar pane, you're going to see the presentation part as well as the Q&A part. The way this works is that I'm going to talk to a presentation, and if during that time, if you have any question that is pertinent to the presentation, you can post that question in the Q&A pod. That way Sandeep can get to it, and that way your doubts get cleared during the webinar. One request that I have is that please keep your questions pertinent to what I'm talking about. Towards the end, I reserve about 20 minutes to answer any open-ended question that may be pertinent more to your candidacy, more to your own preparation than in general to the principles that are being talked about. And that way, if you reserve those questions towards the end, you get my dedicated attention, you get a response that you can actually benefit from. If you ask a question during the session and if you need more inputs from you, you will likely not get a response, because one thing that we hate to do is provide a response that's not going to help you. We don't want you channelizing your energy in the wrong direction. Okay, so let's kind of really talk about why is it that it's important for you to get to that score of 730 or higher for at least most of your if you're aiming for top B schools. And again, this is really important because even though most of you are aiming for that score, a time will come while you're preparing where your mind will tell you, hey, it's really too hard. You've gotten to that score of 700 or 680 or 690 and give up. Why? Because you started at a 530, 540. Most of you, or rather the median starting score of students is at 530, 540. They get to a 650, 660, and they kind of start patting themselves on the back, which is that's when it just starts to set in that, okay, this score may be enough. And that when you get to that score of 650, 660, that's when you need that next boost of energy. So this is motivation for you to really make sure that you go up, that you get to that score of 730. So those are the three reasons you should aim for that score of 730. First is top B schools now need that score. A lot of you have been hearing about schools going GMAT optional. We actually got data at the e-GMAT conference. Very few schools have truly gone GMAT optional or GRE optional for that matter. And even when they're going, they're very selective about who they choose. The other ones actually are looking for those higher scores. Even though this cycle is going to be one of the most competitive cycles, there's still a ton of scholarship money. Schools do want you, and more than 50% of the scholarships go to students who get to that score of 730 or higher. And for those of you who've been tracking MBA earnings or MBA salaries, one thing which you would have noticed is that the delta between total earnings, it's between someone who graduates from a tier 1 school or a tier 2 school, it's the highest that it has ever been. And I'm going to show you the math where we'll say if you graduate from a tier 1 school, you're likely to earn $500,000 more over a decade than if you graduate from a tier 2 school. Okay. So record higher median scores at top B schools. I mean, this is how the scores at top B schools have been trending. You're talking about comparing 2014 versus 2018, and where the scores are fairly in that 2018 era or so. So a few things that you would notice. First of all, no Harvard, no Stanford here. Why? Because even in 2014, they were around that 730 mark. The second thing is there are certain schools such as MIT and Columbia where but 80% of the admitted students had a score of 700 or higher. So essentially what these schools told students was, or prospective applicants was, if you don't have a 700, don't even bother applying. This is because this is despite the fact that we had a 15% decline in test taking population during that time. This year, for the first time, we've actually had an increase in applicants, and this trend was seen for 23 out of top 25 schools. For the 24th school, the trend remained the same, and for the 25th school is where the median score went down a bit, which already had a very high median score. So why is it that the number of applications is the highest this year, or expected to be higher? We still don't know, but it was really high last year, and these schools expect that trend because of COVID. Many people it's kind of pushed many people to think about what they want to do in their life, and it's just led to a tremendous amount of interest in essentially pursuing a postgraduate degree. Okay, and this is something that's, if you're aiming for a tier 2 school, you'll see the same trend in tier 2, which is essentially what tier 1 does. Tier 2 follows, and if you look at Rice, Jones, UCS, US Southern California, or ASU, you can see big score increases over there. Out of the when you look at the top 50 and you look at what are the top 6 schools where you had the biggest score increases, what you're going to find is that 4 out of those top 6 were tier 2 schools. The other 2, Kellogg and Michigan Ross, were tier 1 schools. So that's kind of the impact over here. So that was statistical data. Here's some anecdotal data. So Nishant and Pravi, both of them scored around that 680, 690 mark. Nishant was applied in round 2, was rejected by TAK and a bunch of schools. Now the nice thing about applying to TAK, TAK is probably the best school or the nicest school you can apply to, is that when they reject, they'll give you a reason, they'll give you a hearing, and they'll tell you what they found lacking, which is excellent. Most schools don't do that. So TAK told him that, hey, we love your candidacy, your GMAT score isn't great. So he worked hard again, and then he improved his score to a 740, and he received actually a full fellowship in round 3 and then an admit from Columbia. Similarly, Pravi scored a 680, applied to a bunch of schools in round 1, didn't even get a single interview invite, then improved her score to 740 within 5 hours of updating that 740 score. She received 5 interview invites, a total of $280,000 worth of scholarship, and she went to Kellogg. Similarly, KK applied. Actually, he applied across 2 years with a score of 680, was rejected by 16 schools, improved his score to 720, and applied in round 3, which is like the worst round to apply in. And in round 3, he got 5 full fellowships. So after 15 rejects, the guy got 5 full rides. He's currently studying at Georgia Tech, Scheller. He recently got a job at Amazon. In fact, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can actually watch these 3 guys, their interviews and their MBA journeys. Okay. Bottom line is the GMAT score today is way more important than it has ever been in the past. Let's talk about the second reason, and I love this reason because personally, I got 2 full fellowships when I applied for my MBA. I didn't pay a single penny for my MBA, and I can tell you the feeling when you go into a B school, knowing that you don't have to pay that much or you have a full ride, it's just amazing. It's just the way you explore business school, the way you focus on learning versus worrying about paying that loan. That's fantastic. So USB schools give about $350 million every year of merit-based scholarships. These are not special needs scholarships. These are merit-based scholarships. And based on the data that we have, and e-GMAT does get about $35 million worth of scholarship every year, but 55% of that money goes to students who score 740 or higher, and pretty much all of that money goes to students who score 710 or higher. What are the factors that decide a scholarship? 2 factors: your GMAT score and your interview. And if you do the math right, if you score a 740 or high, this is kind of the median scholarship that you should be getting if you apply properly. Again, most people, they apply properly, the strategies, they can get even much higher scholarships. Here are some examples. Mansi, one of our former students, went to Harvard. She actually got into Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Kellogg, and INSEAD. From Harvard, she got a 90K scholarship. Victor similarly scored a 740, got a full ride from Ross and Keenan Flagler. Kong Bui scored a 760. He got 6 full rides, and essentially he got a very special scholarship from Ohio Fisher, where he not only got a full ride, but the school paid him $1,700 a month as stipend, college living expenses, to study at Ohio Fisher. Similarly, Nishant and Pravi and KK, you can really see this maximum scholarship amounts from respective schools. Their total scholarships were at least 3 to 4 times as much because they got this money from multiple schools. Here's a couple of other interesting stories. So Ayush, one of our former students, scored a 710, applied to a bunch of schools. He interviewed with Ross and Columbia, and his interview went really well, but both these schools waitlisted him. So he reached out to these schools and said, hey, what happened? I thought we really connected during the interview. Why did you guys waitlist me? So both these schools told him, said, we love your candidacy, but your GMAT score is not enough. So he prepared again. He improved his GMAT score to 750 and didn't even apply again. He just updated that score, and within a few days of him updating his score, his waitlist was turned into an admit with scholarship. Okay. And you can actually now watch 160 such success stories. This was done some time back. You can now watch 160 such success stories on our YouTube channel. Okay, it's actually the largest collection of GMAT success and MBA success stories anywhere. In fact, probably 4 to 5 times as many as what GMAT Club has. Um, and here's a quote by John Fuller, who's the former admissions director at Ross. He says, "Someone uh, uh, with a 770 is way more likely to get a financial reward. Why? Because the school probably wants to buy that high GMAT score." Okay. The third reason, probably the most ignored reason, is the delta in total earnings over there. Okay. And to do this, I'm going to compare two schools. One's Babson and the other one is MIT. Both these schools are in the Boston area. They're about 20 miles away, and so about 70% of graduates from both these schools get a job in the New England area. Arguably, they have access to very similar set of opportunities. But when you compare the base salary, they're very, very off. An MIT grad makes at least $40,000 more, and these are conservative numbers, than a Babson grad. If you look at the average bonus, you actually find that the initial year one compensation, the delta is about $60,000. This excludes the stock-based compensation, which is a lot more prevalent for an MIT graduate, which adds another $40K to it. But even if we consider the delta to be $45,000, why? Because you're not going to be changing a job every year, so this component will not apply every year. Even then, a conservative estimate on a pure cash basis is about $450K. So it's about two schools that are located 20 miles away. Okay. So again, I know it's difficult to get to that score of 730, but remember these three reasons. Keep yourself motivated, and when your brain tells you to say it's enough, tell your brain. It could mean a lot of money. It could mean a life transforming experience. It could mean access to a completely different set of opportunities out there. Okay, so with that, let's talk about how do you get to that score of 760, 730, 740, whatever you're aiming for. And this answer doesn't change regardless of what you're aiming for. A lot of people think about, when they think about acing the GMAT, they think about the stuff which is written at the bottom. Say, I've got to get faster at answering questions. I've got to figure out which questions to spend my time on, which questions to let go. I've got to build that stamina to sustain myself through a 3-hour long test. They're important. It's not that they're not important, but all of these things account for 20%. And let me just see if I can write nicely. 20% of the, if I were to really define that in weights, 20% of the weight is there. 80% of the weight when it comes to acing the GMAT is on building ability, and people don't spend enough time on building ability. And this is one point that I want you to take away from this. By the way, these 20% start to become relevant only if you have this 80%. If you don't have ability, you can have the best timing strategy in the world, and it's not going to matter. Okay, so what is ability? I'm going to really talk about two terms. Why? Because people use them interchangeably. One is the accuracy. What is accuracy? You take a 10-question quiz, you get 8 out of those 10 questions correct, and you say my accuracy is 80%. It's an absolute score. When you say my accuracy is 80%, you're not comparing yourself to another individual or another test taker or so. It's an absolute score. Okay. You might get 80% in a quiz. Your ability in that might just be 50th percentile. Why? Because of half the people who take that quiz score 80% or higher. Okay. Ability is a comparative measure. It just really determines how good you are compared to other test takers. Another way to think about ability is to think about the word rank. Ability is nothing but a rank in a certain context. Okay. So to explain this point, I'm going to talk about two students, case 1 and case 2, and I'm going to look at how they go through an adaptive test. And this is, in general, the principle of how an adaptive test works. The GMAT's a bit more sophisticated, but it also follows this principle. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at 6 attempts on 6 questions, actually just on 5 questions. The 6th one is just there to make the chart complete. What you have on the x-axis is the question number, so question number 1 to 5. What you have on the y-axis is the difficulty level of question. The higher we go on the y-axis, the more difficult a question becomes. Student 1, or case 1 as is written over here, gets the first question. He gets it right. As a result, he gets a second question, which is of a slightly higher difficulty level. You can really see the second blue dot over here. is higher on the y-axis, which means the second question is a bit more challenging than the first one. He gets that right as well. Then he gets a third question, which is even more difficult. He gets that wrong. In fact, if you look at the chart, we can predict which question's right versus which question's wrong. Then he gets the fourth question, which is slightly easier. It's actually the difficulty level is between question number 3 and question number 2. If you draw a horizontal line over here and here, you can see where question number 4 is, how it's between 3 and 2. He gets that question. He gets that right. Gets a fifth question, which is slightly more challenging. He gets that wrong. So that's student 1 or case 1. And we're going to kind of halt his test over here so that we can compare him to student 2 or case 2. Student 2 gets gets the first question, medium difficulty level. He gets that wrong. Gets the second question, easier, gets that right. Gets the third question, a bit more challenging, makes a mistake there. Gets the fourth question, that is easier, gets that right, and gets the fifth question right as well. So if I were to really pause this test and end this test at question number 5, then who do you think will be doing better if I were to halt my test over here and say, okay, let's just evaluate what their end scores are. If the test, in other words, were a 5-question test, who would be doing better, student 1 or student 2? Let's get your results. Let's get about 50 responses. So then I'm going to broadcast the results. Oh, I have about 80 responses right now. Close to 103 responses. Yes, great. So about 91% of you say student 1 is doing better. And that's great. Now I want you to tell me, why is it that student 1's doing better? What's the reason behind student 1's higher score? Why is student 1 doing better? You can type your responses in that short answer poll over here on the right hand side. Yes, you guys, he got the harder questions right. He essentially got more difficult questions correct. Okay, or the test measured his ability to is higher because he can answer higher questions correct. A few of you are saying he got the first question correct. That's not the causality. That's an observation. Remember, the reason why he's doing better is because he got the higher questions with higher difficulty correct. He might get the first 3 questions wrong, but after that, if he proves to the test that he can answer more difficult questions correctly, he'll still get a higher score. So another question. Did student 2 even get an opportunity to answer difficult questions? Did the test even serve difficult questions to student 2? No. Pretty much all the questions served to student 2 are below the average difficulty level, barring this first question, which was at the average difficulty level. Okay, and that's another observation which is really important, which is applicable to the GMAT as well. If you don't do well, you won't even get the opportunity to answer hard questions correctly. So bottom line, the takeaway for you is that get your accuracy above on medium questions to above a threshold, only then worry about hard questions. Okay, so for those of you who are e-GMAT students and who are in their stage 2 of learning, do you guys remember what is your threshold for medium cementing quizzes? An e-GMAT student who is in the scholarly stage 2 of learning, 70%. That's the minimum threshold, which is why we have that for you, because you're not even going to worry about hard questions if you can't hit that threshold. Okay, so good. And that's kind of the reason. In fact, if you want to understand the math behind it, you can write to me. I've created a video that outlines the math behind that 70% threshold in cementing medium and 55% threshold in cementing hard. But let's kind of understand the piece over here. Okay, now student 1 got 5 questions. Each one of those 5 questions was at the average difficulty level or above the average difficulty level. Now, in other words, another way to translate this statement over here, if you were to translate this statement, is that the test gave student 1 the opportunity to score higher. Why? Because if the test is going to is serving difficult questions to you, a difficult question has 3x as many points as an easy question does. So the test is giving you the opportunity to get more points. Student 2 didn't even get the opportunity to get more points because he only got the first question at the average difficulty level. Okay, so when you think about the GMAT, there are two challenges that you need to overcome. One is to get difficult questions served to you. Why? Because you want to be like student one. And the second is, of course, you want to answer them correctly, because unless and until you answer them correctly, you won't get more difficult questions served to you. So this is kind of a cycle, and it's a self-reinforcing cycle. It's a beautiful cycle which corrects itself. If you can't answer difficult questions, you get easier questions. If you can answer difficult questions, you continue to get more and more opportunity to answer those correctly. Does that make sense? Yes, no? Does that make sense? Yeah. This is the foundational principle. So again, remember I said acing the GMAT is about ability. Your GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. And I'm going to translate this term ability into a numerical metric that you can track throughout your preparation. In fact, I'm not going to do it. The test does it. Most people actually don't know it. Okay. So this was just anecdotal data in general how the GMAT works. What this over here is real data, okay, which is where we have two students and they look very, very similar. The only difference over here is that this guy got the first two questions wrong. And then the reason I have this example is as to how people look at data and they actually draw inferences from it. So the first thing you're going to really notice is that, okay, student one, this guy's my student one. He got 9 questions out of 41 correct, and this is the old format of the GMAT when the verbal section was 41 questions. And the reason why we have this is because the old format, through the old format, the GMAT prep mocks, which you know as the official GMAT mocks today, they used to give us just so many more insights. It allowed us to peek into the test a lot more. The algorithm hasn't changed, by the way. So even when you have 36 questions, it's still the same algorithm, the same principles apply. And then student 2, got 11 questions wrong. And you'd say, hey, the difference of 2, one way to look at this would be that their score should be very similar. But actually, that isn't the case. Student 1 got a P43, which is a 97th percentile on the GMAT. Okay. Which means that if you assume that 200,000 people, or for those of you who are from India, 2 lakh people take the GMAT, his rank was about 6,000. He was among the top 6,000 students. V32 means a 65th percentile, which means that out of the same 200,000, this guy is among the top 70,000 students. Okay. So a lot of people, what do you guys think about this? When you look at this, what's the first reaction that you get? When you look at this, what's the first reaction? All right. Whack. Some of you are using the F word. A crazy difference. Okay, answering the first few questions right is important. These are all simplistic inferences. Okay. Accuracy is not the right indicator, absolutely. Okay. Too much of a difference. Good. Okay. Many of you are around this. Actually, many of you are probably telling to yourself, the GMAT's really harsh. How many of you are saying, man, the GMAT's a really harsh exam? I know I can mess up very easily. Right? Actually, the GMAT is a very forgiving exam. Probably the most forgiving exam that I know of. Why? You can make 9 mistakes. A lot of people don't recognize that. Hey, the guy made 9 mistakes, was still among the top 3 percentile of students. 9 out of 41. Still among the top 3 percentile. Isn't that forgiving? Doesn't that seem forgiving to begin with? Forget about student 2 for a minute. If you just looked at student 1, it does seem forgiving, right? Okay. Sort of, yes, I know, but you now have student 2 in your mind. I've planted student 2 in your mind. So you guys are saying, what the F, man? So let's kind of worry about this. And let's remember, we just learned how an adaptive test works. So let's just map student 1 and student 2 to our adaptive test. And let's try and explain this. And that's the beauty of a model. When you have a model, you can map data to it and draw conclusions through it. So let's talk about student 2. Student 2 got the first question, which is over 50th percentile level. He got that wrong. Okay. Got the second question, which is over 35th percentile level. Got that wrong. got a third question which was of a 15th percentile level. Okay. He then started getting it right. Now, let's kind of talk about this. Math whizzes over here. Think about a standard normal distribution of ability. And now tell me, only a quant whiz. If you're not strong in quant, don't even bother answering this question. This question is only for quant whizzes. Okay. If you're a quant whiz, you understand standard normal distribution. And if you really say, okay, here's a guy whose median ability is 90th percentile, whose ability is 90th percentile. Okay. What is the likelihood that a 90th percentile student would get a 50th percentile question wrong and a 35th percentile question wrong, one after the other? What is the likelihood? How low? The answer is less than 1 in 10,000. Less than 1 in 10,000. It's not 0.1. Yes, very, very low. If you look at, plot the standard normal curves and you say for these two events to happen one after the other, for a 90th percentile guy, that's very low. So the test at question number 3 was not wrong in saying that, hey, let me serve him a 15th percentile question. Why? How does the GMAT evaluate you? The only way the GMAT evaluates you is on questions that you answer correctly. Okay, so unless and until you answer a question correctly, the GMAT has no way to tell you what your ability is. So it served you, this guy, a 15th percentile question. He did that right. Then it served him a 20th percentile question. He did that right. A 30th percentile question. He did that right. 40th percentile question. 50th percentile question. And continued to serve him more and more difficult questions, till he got to that 90th percentile. Case 1 or student 1 actually started getting 90th percentile questions right from question number 5 or so, and then he continued to answer those questions correctly. Okay, so this is how we map this to a model. Okay, and so the reason why student 1 got this 97 percentile is because he was served more difficult questions and he got more difficult questions correct. Both these students were e-GMAT students. This guy on the real test ended up getting a V44. This guy on the real test ended up getting a V35. Okay. Now, you guys were looking at this through a lens of accuracy. The GMAT doesn't care about accuracy. What it cares about, it's its own ability metric. So the GMAT measured these 3 students' abilities in 3 subsections: sentence correction, critical reasoning, and reading comprehension. And on those 3 subsections on the verbal side, it measured that this guy was at 95th percentile in SC, 95th percentile in CR, and 87th percentile in RC. Now, when you look at both these students through a lens of ability, and you really say this guy has these abilities and this guy has these abilities, do they look very different? Right? So that's what the GMAT measures internally, your individual abilities in SC, CR, and RC, and combining those individual abilities, by combining them, it creates that verbal score, which is either this or this. They are 1:1, so it doesn't matter. And by combining these abilities, it creates this. Okay. And you can really see these ability scores. Has anyone heard of the ESR or the Enhanced Score Report? What is SC, CR, and RC? SC is sentence correction, CR is critical reasoning, and RC is reading comprehension. Okay. If you actually open an enhanced score report, you can see these ability scores. You know, GMAT charges you $30 if you take an in-center test to give you that ESR, and so you can see those ability scores in there. So this is not something that we've made up. This is something which is backed by data. Okay. So again, remember, your GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. If you're aiming for that 90th percentile, always tell yourself, hey, I want to make sure that I can get those difficult questions correctly. Why? Because what's going to happen is that your brain will tell you, when you take a 10-question quiz, 8 out of 10 is correct. And if you've not looked at accuracy, you're going to be super happy about it. But if you have this knowledge that your score is governed by this aspect, you will actually Yeah, good going. You'll look at your mistakes. You're going to figure out why did you make a mistake? How do you not repeat that mistake? Why? Because you tell yourself my GMAT score is governed by my ability to answer these difficult questions correctly. So let me just move forward. Actually, let's go to the outline. And so when you think about, so what abilities does the GMAT measure? It measures 5 abilities. It's 3 abilities on the verbal side and 2 on the quant side. So when you're thinking about a certain GMAT score, say I want to get to a 740, you have to, or 730 or 720 or 760, ask yourself this question automatically. What are the ability scores that I'm aiming for in these subsections? We call these SCCR and RC subsections. Why? Because quant and verbal are sections. So within a section, you have these subsections. Okay, again, remember this, using the GMAT is about building ability. Okay, so here's another data point, and this is essentially, and this is, if those of you who've not seen an ESR, this is how it looks. One of our former students who went from a 520 to a 710, he went from a V17 to a V40, and the reason why I have this is because if you just Google GMAT Club and a long journey from 520, then this is you'd be able to get to his debrief. And what you'd see is this guy got a V40. That V40 score was composed of these 3 ability scores. 94th percentile in SC, but 80th percentile in CR and 73rd percentile in RC. Another thing that you would really see is how forgiving the test is. You know, this guy got half his questions wrong over here in blocks 3 and block 4. This is a 41 question test over there. Okay, so in the first block, he actually, the reason why he was still able to get a 91st percentile is because he proved to the test that he could answer difficult questions correctly. In the first block, he pretty much got everything right. Why? Because the first block was primarily composed of medium and medium hard questions. Then this was a mixture of medium hard and hard questions. But here again, he only got hard questions. He primarily got hard questions. I shouldn't say the word only. And even though he made mistakes, but he still answered half of those correctly, and because of that, the test got him a V40. If you're an e-GMAT student, what's the accuracy threshold accuracy for hard cementing quizzes? What is the threshold accuracy? 55. 55. Yes. And the reason why that is there is because what you see over here, or there are many such screens. This is just an anecdotal example. What are the first, second, and okay, yes, that's a great question. So remember, I'm going to briefly explain that because it's some sort of a mathematical concept, but I'm going to briefly explain that. Remember how we went through a simplistic adaptive test algorithm, and the test was making a decision after every question whether to serve you an easier or a more challenging question? You guys remember that principle of a computer adaptive test? On the GMAT, you know, those decisions are made in blocks. So the GMAT will serve you a random set of questions that have a median difficulty level and a distribution around it. Again, goes to a mathematical term. I'm an algorithm designer from my previous life, so forgive the terms if the terms are alien to you. So in this block, it'll serve you questions where the median difficulty is medium, and there's a distribution of 20 percentile difficulty level around it, and then it'll rank you against all test takers in this block, and accordingly decide the difficulty level for this block, do the same thing accordingly, decide the difficulty level for this block, do the same thing accordingly, decide the difficulty level for this block. It actually serves very, very similar to how, you know, you guys are rated on the job. When you think about how your boss rates you, or how you rate people who work for you, you really say, okay, you look at a set of tasks and you say, okay, I have these 20 people who I have to rate, and I know this guy can do these, and if there are, let's say 10 tasks, this guy can do the 5 tasks, which are, you know, 1 to 5 are easy, a 5 to 8 are medium and 8 to 10 are hard. I know he can do all the easy tasks. So I'm going to focus to figure out whether he can get to the next level. I'm going to focus on giving him medium difficulty tasks. Why? Because I don't have to worry about knowing whether he can do easy tasks. The GMAT works the same way. Once the GMAT makes a decision on whether you can answer those medium questions, it focuses on figuring out whether you can answer the medium hard question and then whether you can answer the hard questions. Okay. Does that make sense? I mean, it's very different, very, very similar to how we as humans behave when we're evaluating individuals. Does that make sense, first of all? Yes, no? Yeah. Again, even if it doesn't make sense to you, it's based in blocks, and usually all of the estimation theory in the world is built around blocks. Okay. When you think about speech recognition on Google, it's built around blocks. It doesn't really look at the alphabet that you speak. It looks at a word, it looks at the sentence, and then it does a block prediction. When you think about cell phones and how they send data, for those of you who know that, it's built around the prediction, and estimation is done based on blocks because it gives a much more reliable result. What's the approximate size? The approximate size is about 7 questions. It's always an odd number. Okay. All right. So let's talk about personalized study plan. What is a personalized study plan and what do you need? Why do you need one? Now, each one of you is different, and each one of you has your own innate strengths, innate weaknesses, and a personalized study plan in general helps you leverage those strengths and weaknesses. Now, let's kind of ask you, you guys have been studying for the GMAT, at least many of you. So when you think about a study plan, tell me, what should a study plan do? What's the job of a study plan? What is the job of a study plan? Just tell me that according to you. And then I'm going to tell you how we at e-GMAT think about a study plan. Okay, I have 35 odd responses. Let me broadcast results. And you can see the variety of responses here. Your score high, systematically help you achieve your score, to coordinate your prep with your daily jobs, should be calendarized, set targets. So some of you have talked about the attributes of a study plan. Okay. Some of you have actually talked about the job, and I really like this answer. Tell me what, let me just make sure I keep on getting responses. Tell me what to study, when to study, and how much effort to put in. Okay. So that's a really great response to this. Excuse me. Okay. So at e-GMAT, when we build study plans for you, we try and answer these 3 questions for each individual. And an e-GMAT has built about 50,000 study plans overall. Okay. The first question that it answers is, how will I reach my GMAT score? So we are talking about at 740. I talked about that 740 is composed of 5 ability scores. In the e-GMAT world, they're composed of 9 ability scores. So what ability score am I aiming for in each of the 9 subsections is what we care about. So how will I reach? What is that path to that target GMAT score that I'm aiming for? If I were to draw a parallel, and I like to use companies such as Microsoft or Google or even Apple, think about if Apple had a revenue goal for the next quarter, the study plan, the equivalent of a study plan would really say how much revenue would they get from the iPhone division, how much revenue would they get from the services division, how much revenue would they get from the Mac division, how much revenue would they get from, what else does Apple do? Yeah, I think let's just talk about those 3 divisions. That's good. So this is defining those revenues. In the same way, those 9 subsections that exist are subsections that push that score towards that 740. So how much ability am I aiming for in sentence correction, critical reasoning, algebra, number properties, word problems, so that I get to that 740 score. And because there are these 9 abilities, there are lots and lots of combinations that get to that 740 score, and finding that perfect combination for you is the first and a really important aspect that a study plan looks at. The second thing it does, it really answers this question. How much time do I need to, once you have those 9 ability scores over here, how much time do I need to put in to get to those ability scores? And because, hey, you may need 50 hours in SC and you may only need 10 hours in algebra, or 15 hours in number properties, or vice versa. You may need only 10 hours in SC and 40 hours in number properties. And which is where, this time is very different, and knowing that time is really important. So that's the second question that a study plan does. Talked about the first, talked about the second. The third question is, where do I put in this time? How much time am I putting in learning concepts? How much time am I going to put in to practice? How am I going to practice? Where am I going to practice from? Will I start practicing hard questions right away, or will I focus on easier questions early on? And that's the third question. And a lot of people kind of think of, when they think of the study plan, they think only about the first question. Each one of these questions is really important when it comes to the study plan. And to illustrate the importance of these questions, I'm going to really look at two students, Abby and Chase. And both of these students are aiming for that score of 740. Both of these students are going to go from that score of 600. Okay. So Abby has is someone who has a more balanced score. Her starting quant score is 42 and her verbal score is 31. Chase is someone who's really strong in quant. His starting quant score is 49 and his starting verbal score is 23. So first of all, how many of you are like Abby and how many of you are like Chase? Who do you associate with? Let's get this poll over here. Who are you more like, Abby or Chase? Here's a poll question. Who are you more like? Are you someone who's more balanced in quant and verbal, or are you someone who's super strong in quant? And you could also be someone who's super strong in verbal. In that case, put yourself as Abby, because you're the opposite of Chase in that case. So that's good. We have about 46 to 54. That's really good to know. All right, let's go in here. Okay, so again, remember, just knowing Q42 is not correct. You've got to translate that Q42 into arithmetic and algebra geometry scores, and similarly that V31 into this and this. Now, to make things simple, because you're going to see a lot of numbers, I've tried to keep the numbers as similar as possible. So in the quant side, both Abby is at a 42nd percentile in arithmetic and algebra geometry. Now, she could have, there are about 20 ways to get to a Q42. I could have chosen any of the 20 ways, where she could have been at a 6th or 5th percentile over here and a 30th or a 27th percentile over here. But that would have just added a lot of numbers to you. So they're around that 40th percentile in quant, or around that 60th percentile in verbal. Similarly, Chase is around that 72nd percentile in quant and around that 35th percentile in all the subsections in verbal. Just, it's easier for you to remember. You only have to remember 4 numbers now if you are keeping track. So ask yourself, given the fact that both Abby and Chase are have a starting score of 600, do we think they should aim for the same quant and verbal scores? Should they put in the same amount of time? Should they be learning the same thing? And the answer to each one of these questions, of course, is no. They're very, very different students, even though their starting score is identical. So how do they figure out where do they go about putting their time? And we have this tool called PSP, which is an AI-driven utility that allows you to optimize that study plan for you given your starting abilities. All you do is put your starting abilities over there in PSP, and it comes out with a plan for you. Okay. So Abby is at that score of 600. You can see this is again a screenshot of PSP, and let me just make this bigger. So and you can see her ability scores over here. So you put this in PSP, and what PSP tells you is, hey Abby, to get to 740, you must go to a Q48 and a V42, and you can see the ability scores over here. Okay. And then, because Abby is going to put in about about 24 hours or about 2 hours per day on the weekday, about 5 hours per day on the weekend. What it tells Abby is you need about 2 weeks in SC, 2 weeks in CR, another 2 weeks in RC to go from a 59th percentile in SC to a 94th percentile in SC, and in RC to go from a 60th percentile to a 90th percentile. On the quant side, you need about 2.5 weeks or about 3 weeks to go from that 42nd percentile to that 65th percentile. Now, one thing which is really important for you to understand is that Abby is not trying to get to a super high score. She's not aiming for a Q50. She's not aiming for a Q51. She's only aiming for a Q48, which means she doesn't need to solve the hardest questions in quant because she's not aiming for that super high score, even though she's aiming for that 740. Okay. So one thing that what's the thought process behind deciding the target section from the current? So that's a great question. So the thought process is the likelihood of success. Remember, if you're strong in verbal, you're much more likely to succeed in verbal, and you're much more likely to get there faster. So Abby started on a very strong note in verbal, and verbal, for those people who are not strong in verbal, is a lot more confined than quant. Quant is kind of an open field if you're not strong in quant, and so that's the thought process. How do you determine the present scores if you're just starting for the GMAT? If you've just started preparing, you actually take a sigma X mock. Okay, take a sigma X mock. It gets you your ability scores. It's the only mock test in the world that will give you your ability scores. Even official mock tests don't. So there are two ways to get your starting abilities. One is take the actual GMAT and spend in center, and then essentially pay $30 for an ESR. The other is take a sigma X mock, and you guys can bookmark this link and essentially get your ability scores. Okay. Is it possible to take the same mock again? No. If you're an e-GMAT student, we have a couple of other ways that we can tell you how to get your starting abilities. Okay. For Chase, the tool works very differently. It says, hey Chase, you're very strong in quant, so let's kind of leverage your strength in quant. So let's take you to a Q50. The tool always makes sure that it gives you a recommendation that not only maximizes your chances, it also takes some luck factor into account. So the tool doesn't go to a Q51 very easily. It goes to a Q50. Why? Because 50 and 51, there's always some luck factor involved in there. So it says, hey Chase, you should get to a Q50. Accordingly, you should get to a V40 to a V41 over there to get to a 740. Okay. How much time does Chase need? He needs about a week in arithmetic and a week in algebra geometry, and then he needs about 3 weeks each in SC, CR, and RC. Okay. So here are two different study plans for both Abby and Chase, and essentially when you look at this, even though they look they have the exact same starting score, both Abby and Chase. They have the exact same target score. Their target verbal scores are different. Their target quant scores are very different. A Q50 student is very, very different from a Q48 student over there. Okay, but that's not the biggest difference. I think the biggest difference in this, the biggest value that this is adding is these estimates over here. What this is saying is that, hey Chase, you need 9 weeks just on verbal, which is twice 50% more time than what Abby needs on verbal. And by the way, Abby, you need 3 weeks on quant, which is twice as much time than what Chase needs on quant. So overall, you get a really good estimate of how much prep time you need, but you also get a good estimate of where you need to spend that time. Now, those of you prepared by yourself, if you take wrong estimates, what happens? If you really say, okay, I'm going to get done with SC in a week, and you really need 3 weeks to get done with SC, you actually start rushing through things. And as you start rushing through things, what happens is that essentially you don't focus on learning, you focus on completing things. And when you do that, you don't hit that 90th percentile. Why? Because there's no way you can hit the 90th percentile if you don't focus on learning. Has that happened with anyone before? Made wrong estimates, really said, I'm going to finish this thing in 10 days without recognizing how long you needed them. And essentially, the default action is rush, 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 finish, finish, finish. Cover curriculum rather than worrying about learning. You don't want to be in that position. Okay. Now, but this is not the best thing. The best thing is determining, should he spend the whole 2 weeks for that section? Yes, he should. And this is where a lot of the recommendations that you're going to see from us are going to be very different. And because those recommendations are different, our success rate is very different as well. Okay, yes, the whole 2 weeks on SC. Do not go on CR. Think about it this way. The last time you learned something which was super intense, where you wanted to be the best in the world. Remember, what is 95th percentile? What does 95th percentile translate into? What does 95th percentile in SC mean? Can you guys tell me? What does 95th? You're in the top 5% of people. You're in the top 10,000 test takers who've done SC. You are better than 80% of the Americans who have studied sentence correction throughout their life. And if you're starting at a 30th percentile and you want to get to the 90th percentile, don't you think you would need at least 2 weeks of dedicated effort? Don't you think so? You would, right? And a lot of people, and most test prep companies will tell you, no, study SC with CR. Right? Yeah, and the question is, ask them, how do you think I'm going to get from the 30th percentile to the 90th percentile if I'm going to study 2 subsections in the same time? Do they even ask you what is your starting ability? No, most people don't. And which is why their students are not successful. So and this is where data-driven approaches is really important. And think about how you learn skills in your job, right? There was a time when you were learning, when you first learned, for those of you who are coders, learned how to do coding. For those of you who are analysts, learned how to do analysis. You just learn that for 3 to 4 days or a week. But don't you lose skill and sharpness in other sections? No, you don't. Once you've crossed a threshold, you don't. I mean, ask yourself, how many of you are doing something very different from what you are doing now? How many of you when you started your job, you did something and now you're doing something very different? For example, how many of you have gone from, let's say, learning how to code to doing program management, learning how to doing design to actually managing projects? Now, have you lost your ability to code, or will you take a couple of days to get back to it? I mean, if you were to go back to your original life, would you not just take a couple of days to get back to it? No, that ability never loses. I mean, think about, if you don't drive for a month, would you lose the ability to drive? No. Maybe you'll have to be careful for the first 20 minutes, but that's about it. Which is why we have what I'm going to talk about. You will not. And the answer to that is e-GMAT is. What is the concept of cementing? For those of you who know, what does cementing do? Remember this, when we learn something, you learn something, and you cross a threshold when it gets imbibed in your brain. We call that cementing. Once you cross the cementing stage, you don't forget it. If you don't cross the cementing stage, yes, you will. And which is where learning something to a certain degree, doing that focused effort, is really important to begin with. It's like riding a bike, yes. Well, that's a great example. Why? Because I started riding a bike after about 2 years this year. It's very, very similar to that. Okay. All right, I'm going to answer, can we not begin with sigma x mark slightly later? Just please hold on to that question. So, which is where the question that you're asking are great questions, and this is a great introduction to what we call as the stages of learning. Okay, so when you think about learning something new, you say, okay, what activity do I do and how much ability do I get to? Okay, so when you learn concepts, And if you in a subsection, let's say SC, number properties, if you just know concepts, you can get to the 25th percentile ability. You can solve super easy questions. If you know how to apply those concepts, if you've learned the application, okay, while solving a question, what steps do I need to follow? You get to that 50th percentile ability. Okay. Once you master that application, once that application becomes second nature, and once you have solved about 100 questions using that properly, using that method, a lot of people solve 200, 300 questions without a method. They kind of still remain over here. Okay. But if you learn a method and then solve 100 questions, that's when you hit that 70th percentile ability. Now, even when you hit that 70th, you're still not at that 90th percentile ability. You still have certain kinks in your armor, also chinks in your armor, and that's where you have to refine to perfection. That's where analytics start to help you to really say, how do I go from the 70th percentile to that 90th percentile? Okay. Once you hit 80th to 90th, that's when you can leave a subsection, go to another subsection and come back to it. Okay. Why? Because after this, it's all about maintaining performance. Okay. But a little revision is needed. Yes, you can revise a bit. You can spend an hour on a week and revising all the bookmark questions. Yes, but that's all there is once you hit that 80th percentile over here. And this is really important overall. And this mapping of ability to that stage of learning is something that you should know, because it allows you to make good decisions. The parallel that you guys are drawing about biking, about riding, or about going back to a job that you used to do is very similar to that. You've gone beyond that master application stage, and which is why you can get back to it in a couple of days or so. Okay. So remember Abby and Chase? How long will it take for one to hit 90th percentile in a particular section? Depends on your starting ability. Remember, that's what we did for Abby and Chase right now. That's what the PSP does. It gives you that estimate. Now, Abby is starting in around that 60th percentile or so. Okay. Abby is around that 60th percentile. Okay. So where do you think she's going to spend? She had 2 weeks to spend in SC, CR, and RC each. Where do you think she'll be? Which stage of learning do you think she'd be spending that time? If you're starting at that 60th percentile. Given this chart. And given what you learned over here. Which stage of learning will Abby be spending her time? Mastering application, yes. Abby would be spending a bulk of her, she probably knows 90% of the concepts, so she's not going to spend a ton of time over here. She's actually not even, if she were an e-GMAT student, I would go through a SC path, which is called as revision B, and then go to have her go to cementing. But she's going to spend those 2 weeks in mastering application, refining to perfection, and maintaining her performance. That's where she would be. Why? Because she's starting at that 60th percentile. I don't want to waste her time going through concepts. On the other hand, on the quant side, she's not aiming for that 90th percentile. She's aiming for that 64th, 65th percentile. And she has a really low starting ability, so I'm going to have her spend her time over here. You can see how Abby's approach to different subsections is very, very different. And how it makes logical sense based on what she's aiming for. Can you see that? On verbal, she's aiming for the 96th percentile. So yes, you've got to be able to solve the hardest question because, hey, Abby, that's what you're aiming for. On quant, you're aiming for the 64th, 65th percentile just because your goal is to get to 740 first. You may aim for that 760, but let's get to 730, 740. Then we can go there, and that's where this is really important. How many of you think about your preparation in this manner? This is just the study plan. How many of you do this? Think about it. Okay. There's a reason why Microsoft doesn't focus as much on Bing. Why? Because most of their revenue comes from Office 365 or Azure, right? And there's a reason why Google thinks about their own search. Why? Because the majority of their revenue comes from it. In this case, most of Abby's score is driven by verbal. She's going to think about verbal and not worry as much about quant. That's how good companies work. That's how good test takers should work too. So where does Chase spend his time? Very, very similar. Chase has to learn the basics. Remember, he's around that 35th percentile. Okay. He has to learn the basics. He has to master application, but he's not aiming for such a high ability on the verbal side. So he's going to actually spend less time than Abby to refine to perfection and maintain his performance. But again, you can really see why does Chase need 3 weeks full time in SC? Why? Because he has to do this additional step. Abby did not have to do this additional step. And because of that, he needs 50% more time than Abby did in SC. On the other hand, he's already at the 72nd percentile. This is all that he needs to do. Why? Again, function of starting abilities. Really, really, really important. Again, even though Chase is going to spend 10.5 to 11 weeks studying for his GMAT, Abby is going to spend about 9 weeks studying for her GMAT. Where they spend their time is very, very, very different. Chase and Abby cannot study the same resources together. They can actually be great study buddies. Why? Because Abby knows more verbal than Chase. Chase knows more quant than Abby does. But they're not going to study the same content together. That will be a wastage of time. So is it more important to focus on strengthening your strong areas and then bringing your weak area? That's a great observation. So here is the thing, right? So the answer to that question is I won't really do a comparative. You've asked a comparative question and the answer to that is no, but I know what the source of that question is. So you're on to something which is really important. Let me just respond to this question by saying it is foolish to leave your strengths on the table and worry about your weaknesses. So whatever your strength is, maximize your strength because that's going to be the easiest for you to enhance your score. And then once you maximize your strength, get to that 90th, get 90% of all the juice that you can get out of that strength, then worry about strengthening your weakness if you need to. That's what it is there. Does that answer your question? Okay. After completing stage 1 from the study plan, should you do no, you don't take a Sigma X mock. No, what's the point of taking a Sigma X mock that has all the subsections if you've only done one subsection? That's why you take a cementing quiz, medium and hard. That's why you take an ability quiz. That's why we have all of those. An ability quiz in SC, an ability quiz in number properties is like a mock test in number properties. Why would you do that? How frequently should you be taking mocks? You shouldn't be taking mocks. Your GMAT strategy experts tell you when you should take mocks. You should take mocks once you are done with your target abilities in 60% of the subsections. That's when you can take mocks. But before that, you have all these cementing and ability quizzes and you have those test readiness quizzes that we ask you to take that tell you how you're doing. There's no point taking a mock test. What happens when you take a mock test? Let me just ask this. You take a mock test, let's say you're studying SC. You take a mock test, you do well in SC, okay, but you actually stumble in critical reasoning. And then what happens? You leave SC and you start doing critical reasoning. Has that happened with anyone? Has that happened with anyone? Yes. So what happens when you do that? You do well in SC, but you're still at 70th percentile, and you leave SC at that point. You say, I've got to start CR because, hey man, I sucked at CR in this mock, and that's what I need to focus on. That's bad decision. That's what happens when you do that, you get to a zigzag preparation path. Has anyone gotten to a zigzag preparation mark? SC to CR, CR to number properties back to SC. So you're kind of doing that circular logic. Don't do that. Don't take mocks. Sigma X, take in the beginning, then out of the 9 subsections, once you're done with 6, then you can start taking Sigma X mocks. But before that, finish the course, do cementing, measure ability quizzes, do test readiness quizzes in Scholaranium. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm sneezing so much, but does that make sense? And again, if you have doubts, if you're an e-GMAT student, write to your GMAT strategy expert. You will get a beautifully designed study plan for you. Some of you actually have a study plan. If you've written to our strategy team, you get a PowerPoint with your study plan with all the steps in there. Has anyone done that? I'm okay. I'm in Arizona. Yeah. Yeah, you get that PowerPoint, you get the video with it, which tells you what you need to do. Right? You get that personalized video as well from Atre or from DJ or from the strategy expert is only for e-GMAT students, just to make sure. Okay. And again, if you don't understand your study plan, we do that for you. All right. If you are an e-GMAT student, you know how to contact the support team. Yeah, you know, write to support or write to me. It'll get to the strategy team automatically. All right. So let's kind of move forward because we still have about 40% of the content to cover. What is the Sigma X mock query? Yeah, we'll come to it. Don't worry. And if it's not answered towards the end, I will spend time. So open-ended Q&A. So even though both, again, this is a very important takeaway for you because a lot of people don't recognize that. Even though both Abby and Chase are aiming for that same score, the time required to get there and what components of the course they use, they're very, very different. Why? Because each one of you is an individual and hence you need your own paths. How many of you, again, you've talked about this, so we're not going to worry about this. So if you're an e-GMAT student, you should have that personalized study plan by yourself, should know how to execute. You should have a vision of how you're going to reach your target score, how many hours you need, what is the sequence of steps, how are you going to use our platforms, which is our learning platform, Scholaranium, and as well as Sigma X mocks, and you should have a very thorough understanding of the 3 stages of learning. If you don't have it, write to the support team. And again, remember, give them some time. We usually respond to most queries during the weekend, but this is in 24 hours. Actually, our SLA is about 18 hours that we maintain right now, but this is the weekend, so do that. Also, make sure we have these onboarding sessions for our students. Make sure you attend those sessions as well, and also attend the test readiness sessions. Okay, if you're a free trial student, take a Sigma X mock, get your starting abilities, have a target score in mind. We actually used to give you this in pre-COVID era where we would actually have you work with a GMAT strategy expert and we'll help you build your study plan. It's just in the last 1 month, we've not been able to do that. Our first allegiance is to our customers. So that's something that we can't do, but we can definitely offer you this mock test and we can have your starting abilities or so. It's just that during the COVID era, during the last 1 month, we've had a huge increase in demand from our students. And also we've about 30% of e-GMAT has been sick. So we're very, very cautious of where we spend our time. What's our fee structure? Just look at our website. You'd see our fee structure over there. So I'm going to talk about how to build ability. Okay. And some of the advice that I've given you is very different from what others have given you, and some of the advice that I'm going to talk about next is also going to be very, very different. So to do that, I'm going to actually set some context here to really say, why should you listen to me? And there's no better context than success. Okay. For those of you who go on GMAT Club, you've seen we have upwards of 2,000 reviews and others, very few have, upwards of 500. But I'm going to just focus on reviews which are after 2016. Why? Or 2016 and onwards. Why? Because this is when GMAT Club started their verified reviews policy, and which means that you needed an official score report which was linked to the GMAC. You couldn't even submit a PDF. You had to provide an official score report link, which is the same link that you submit to business schools to verify your scores. If you took the online GMAT, you had to give your GMAC login where someone would log in, verify your score. Why? Because if you take the online GMAT, you don't get that score report link to do that. And when you look at those verified scores and you look at the next 4 top rep companies, what you would find is that we've gotten more verified scores than anyone else has. In fact, even if you compare the next 4 entities, we still have more. So a lot of people say, okay, you started earlier, you had a head start, even though we didn't start before Manhattan, Veritas, or Magoosh. And so we said, even when you look at in 2021, this is just all the reviews from 1st of January to 30th of April, we've garnered a lion's share of all reviews. In fact, There are two companies that have delivered any meaningful success. That's us and TTP, Target Test Prep. Everyone else is practically not delivered success or so. Okay, and this is data collated from GMAT club reviews. You can go look at this data over there. Okay. So when I say the advice that I'll give you, put this in context and to really say, and there are about 15 partners on GMAT club today. Many companies from India are now partners, so you can really see that. So how do you build ability and really how these components get to those stages of learning? So what have we learned so far? One thing is you need that 730 score if you want to get to top B schools. The second is to get there, you've got to build ability. PSP tells you how you should get to that score, and then there are these 4 stages of learning and 1 stage of maintenance over here. Another revision piece over here is that you do different activities at different stages. If you're starting at a very low score, you've got to learn concepts, learn application. Once you've taught these concepts, once you've learned these concepts, you go to master application. Do we teach specific topics? We have the world's most comprehensive courses out there. Yes, every topic in the world on the GMAT is, we teach every topic. Okay, so how many of you are stuck at the 60th percentile? How many of you have studied for a subsection and are stuck at the 60th percentile? Simple yes, no. So I put in a lot of effort, I just don't seem to be able to go forward. Okay, yes. So let's understand why you would be stuck. And again, remember this, a lot of you are saying yes, let me just broadcast results. So let's say, why is it that you get stuck over there? So I'm going to compare 2 students, someone who's at 60th percentile, the other one who's at 90th percentile. And I'm going to really talk about the fact that they're not, as individuals, they're not very different. The difference is how they approach the test, their outlook towards it. Let me ask this over there. I'm going to actually ask a poll question, which is very, very. So if you're stuck at 6, or rather, let me ask this question. How does your preparation look like? And the options that are over here are learning, practice, and essentially, where are you spending time in terms of, if you've spent more than 100 hours, where have you spent time? If you spend more than 100 hours, remember, if you're practicing questions, that's practice. Three, 2, and this is a question that no one thinks about, by the way, which is why you're taking longer to answer this question. But let me end the poll and broadcast results. And what you see is that only 36% of you have chosen choice A, and the other 64% have chosen choices B or C. And this is a really telling data point for me. Okay, people who get to that 90th percentile do practice as a part of their conceptual learning. So 60th percentile means about 280,000 people who are at the same level or better than you. In a certain subsection, and we're talking about SC, the 60th percentile guy spent 40 hours. The starting ability was 30th percentile, and very similar capability to the 90th percentile guy over there. So in many metrics, these guys are comparable, yet this guy is among the top 20,000 students. He's among the top 80,000 students overall. Now, getting to that 90th percentile is about focusing on achieving perfection, and how a 60th percentile guy looks at SC and how a 90th percentile guy looks at SC is very, very different. A 60th percentile guy says, hey, GMAT's intense correction, if I have to ace GMAT SC, I'm going to ace subject verb, verbs, pronouns, modifiers, parallelism, comparison, and meaning. Okay. If I have to, very, very similar to how you really say, if I have to learn programming, I'm going to learn if statement, I'm going to learn a for loop, I'm going to learn while loop, I'm going to learn what a class is, and a bunch of those other things. Again, I did programming 25 years back, so I kind of remember it vaguely. But that's kind of what they focus on. Okay. The method that they use is they use splits as the primary method. They really look at answer choices first. They really look at how are the answer choices different, and that's their primary technique to figure out which option is correct. The meaning for them is secondary. When they're learning, they actually get about 7 to 10, maybe 15 feedback points while learning to really say, are they learning properly? And primarily once they do the learning, they spend about 30-35% of all the time learning concepts, reading a book or going through video lessons, and about 70% of the time practicing questions. And they'd go to GMAT Club, they'll open the OG and do that. How many of you who are stuck at 60th percentile, this seems familiar to you guys? This is, and when I was saying this, you said, this seems like my story in sentence correction. That's how I look at sentence correction. That's how I approach it. That's how I have spent time. Anyone else? This seems familiar to you? Same story. Yes, a lot of us. If you're stuck at 60th percentile, this is what you're doing. A 90th percentile guy does not think about it in this way. For him, GMAT sentence correction, the error types in SC are just a very basic thing. For him, sentence correction is about sentence structures. It's about mastering sentence structures, and he or she focuses on mastering those sentence structures, which, by the way, have these error types. Okay, and he or she understands, once I master various sentence structures and how to identify errors in those sentence structures, there are about 200 of them, I'm going to be able to hit that 90th percentile. Why? Because if you understand sentence structures, you can identify errors in them. Okay, to understand sentence structures, they use meaning as the primary method to solve questions. For them, meaning is not an error type; it's an approach. It's a lifestyle, or rather, it's how they breathe an SC question. Okay, when they're learning, they need to make sure that they can identify those sentence structures. They get feedback 80 to 100 times or so, which means that they correct themselves while learning. As a result, they spend about 60% of their time learning, about 40% of their time practice. Now, of course, both of them are spending 40 hours, so that 60% means their learning is longer than the other group, but they're practicing while learning, which is how they're getting these 80 to 120 points of feedback. But that's very, very focused practice. That's not random practice. What do you mean a feedback point? Can you identify when a verb ing modifier is actually addressing the noun versus the action of the noun? That's a feedback point. Do you have the ability to identify? Okay, that's an example of a feedback point. Okay, and I'm going to talk about a few more feedback points. And the question over there is, if GMAT SC really tests these 200 sentence structures or so, how can you achieve perfection if you only get feedback 7 to 10 times while learning? It's just not possible to do that. Especially if you're starting at the 30th percentile. Yes, if you're starting at that 80th percentile, the 7 to 10 feedback points are okay. Why? Because you don't have that many gaps. But if you're starting at the 30th, 40th, 50th percentile in SC, there is no way you can do that. It's just doesn't make logical sense. Okay. The second piece is how specific that feedback is very important. Why? Because if that feedback isn't specific enough, you're not going to be able to act upon it. How many of you have experience? Anyone who's an LMP student over here? Anyone who's an LMP student? LMP is our last mile push program where we help you get to a 730, 740 from a 680. If you're an LMP student, what you have gotten and been working with our strategy consultants are hyper specific improvement plans. These are like 3-day, 4-day improvement plans that we provide. And the reason we're the only prep company that does that, it's not that other prep companies don't want to do it, they just don't have the data to do it. The reason we're able to do this is how we've instrumented your course and how we've instrumented Scholaranium over there. And when you learn how to apply these concepts, what feedback do you get to really say that you've learned these concepts? You're in that application stage to begin with. That's really important. Okay. So let's kind of tell you, this is how much feedback we give when you're just in the SC course. Just in the SC course, you get 75 personalized feedback points. Every activity in the SC course has its own feedback points at a conceptual level as well as at an application level. When you go through an application file, you get a score. When you go through a practice file, you get a score. When you go through a concept file, the videos are embedded with technology that gives you a score. When you're going through cementing, you get feedback. When you're doing test readiness quizzes, you get feedback over there in this case. Okay. And each of these feedbacks is not one-on-one assessment. You look at least 5 assessment items to give you each feedback. You guys were talking about how many questions are in their block, and I talked about 7 questions in a block. We look at a bare minimum 5 assessment items for each feedback point or so. Okay. So let's talk about the method piece. Why? Because that's kind of the attitude of a 90th percentile student or so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a question. And I'm going to take this question later on, whosoever has this question. I'm going to give you a question. I want you to solve that question in a manner that you would typically solve. Okay. So, but before I do that, I don't want to time you guys. So I want about 50 students to say still solving. That way, when you choose an answer choice other than the original answer choice, we will call time. So I want about 50 students to say still solving. 25, 26. And we're going to do the same practice tomorrow. So this is a GMAT strategy webinar. Our subject matter webinars, we practice a ton of questions and we use this practice. 48, 49, 50 students are saying still solving. Here is the question, guys. Good luck, and I'm going to mute myself. All right, last 15 seconds, get those answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Okay, let me broadcast the results. This is how you guys did. Choice C, super popular. Choice D, also very popular, as is choice B and as is choice E overall. So that's really, really important to know which are the choices where people got confused. I don't know which answer is correct. Actually, I know, but I'm not going to tell you right now which answer is correct because we're going to solve this question. Okay, and okay. So when you think about this, there aren't very many splits that exist in this question. You know, choice A and choice B. Choice A starts with the church coined, and it has a but. Choice B starts with while. Choice C starts with while as well, but then you essentially have three beginnings to it. You have 4 choices that have but in there. Essentially, there's just very many splits in this, and there are changes in sentence structures as well. Okay. Bottom line is it's very difficult to use splits, even if you wanted to use splits on something like this, because none exist, and that can happen in a certain question. So we're going to look at the meaning-based approach to solve these questions. And by the way, at e-GMAT, we solve every question using a meaning-based approach, even where you have splits which are right then and there. Why? Because meaning-based approach, much easier to solve questions. The reason why the question was made was to actually serve an intended purpose, communicate a meaning, and so the meaning-based approach really just hits the nail on its head. Okay, so let's look at this over here. Is the meeting complete? No, this webinar isn't done. We are still working on it. Probably the most important part of the webinar. So let's look at this, and to understand what the author intends to communicate through the sentence, what we are going to do is we're going to pause strategically at various points, and so until and unless we understand the meaning of that sentence completely. Okay, so let's look at this sentence, and this is what we call as creating the sentence structure. The church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive to Christianize celebration of Lupercalia is claimed by few experts. So you can see how the bulletized pieces are logically organized. The church coined is claimed by the church coined the date February 14th is claimed by few experts as a logical sentence. Whatever, it coined this date with an ulterior motive, but it is celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial, which is kind of the most prevalent belief. Okay. So when you think about this question, the first thing you've got to look at is what is it that the author wants to communicate? And there are 3 aspects that the author wants to communicate. That's something, don't worry about any errors that exist. Don't worry about which answer choice is correct. Just worry about what is it that the author wants to communicate over here. So the first thing you should have gotten out is there are 2 claims that exist in this question about, you know, why February 14th is celebrated as Valentine's Day. That the claim 1 is that the church designated it and with a specific motive, and that motive was ulterior. Okay. The second is to honor the burial or the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. Okay. And then the third aspect is claim 1 is done by a few experts. Claim 2 is done by a different set, which is the most prevalent belief. This is what you should have, without even worrying about the errors, you should have actually gotten out of this. Okay. Now, when you were solving this, tell me which ones you could not identify or you did not identify while doing this. And this is a multiple response question. You can choose all 3. You can choose 1 and 2. You can choose 2 and 3. Which ones were you not able to identify? And the reason why this is important to identify is because the author wants you to communicate these 3 things, and you need to be able to communicate this properly. If you weren't able to communicate this properly, if you weren't able to identify that this needs to be communicated, you will likely make a mistake. Okay. 3, 2, and 1. You can really see choice number 3 was the fact that these 2 claims were made by 2 different groups of experts was something that many of you struggled with. Some of you also struggled with number 2, which is the 2 claims over here, and some of you struggled with claim 1 as well. Okay, we already did that. So if you could not understand, if you did all 3, you while solving the sentence before you choose the correct answer choice, you understand the meaning well enough, and you've done the basic piece of the meaning based approach. You should have gotten this question right if you actually took this forward and applied it. If you did not, if you did not observe any one of them, either one any one of them, then you need to build that skill set of identifying what is it the author wants to communicate. Okay, so, and to achieve that 90th percentile, you need to do this. It's just not going to be possible without this. Okay, so now that we've identified the various aspects, okay, let's kind of talk about the errors in the original sentence. And essentially, you do a sentence structure again, and you say, okay, you have a nice subject verb pair over here, but this part does not have a subject, and this does not have a subject as well. So the highlighted verbs don't have a subject. So there's clearly a subject verb error over there. When you do that sentence structure, when you do the meaning analysis, you not only extract those aspects, you also are able to figure out what the errors are. Okay. Now let's kind of analyze this, and I'm going to actually have your polls over here so that you guys can see how you went about doing this. Let me see how you poll this. So this is how you guys polled. Choice B says, while with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, a few experts do claim. In choice B, who has an ulterior motive? In choice B, who has an ulterior motive? The experts. In choice A, who had the ulterior motive? The church. That's a huge change in meaning. Okay, here is choice B once again. Here is the original sentence. Here are the three aspects that we wanted to communicate. Okay, so it also fails to capture the motive. Why did the church actually Christian? Why did the church name February 14th as Valentine's Day? Can you see the change in meaning in choice B? The 14 of you who chose choice B. And if you did not get those aspects early on, you would not be able to identify this. Remember, claim 1 in the original sentence was done by church. In this sentence, claim 1 is done by a few experts. While with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration, a few experts. In this case, a few experts have the ulterior motive, not the church. Okay, this is a meaning distortion. Let's look at choice C over here. Choice C says, while a few experts claim that the church coined February 14 as Valentine's Day, blah, 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 their more prevalent belief. Okay, who is making both claims 1 and 2 in this case? Who is making claims 1 and 2 in this case? Experts. Is that what the author wanted to communicate? No. No. Yet, this is the most popular choice. Why is it that you guys chose this? You didn't focus on the meaning. The meaning, it's changed completely. And this is where I talk about the meaning-based approach, where I talk about the aspects that you've got to extract out of it. And as you attend the SC session next week, you're going to really see how this meaning-based approach can be used to solve the most challenging official questions. Okay. Why is this wrong? Because it illogically suggests that the same set of experts have the two stated claims or so. People who chose choice C, can you see why choice C is wrong? There's no way in the world this can be right. It just changes the meaning completely. If you were the CEO of a company and you intended to communicate the meaning in choice A and you wrote what was there in choice C, you will get sued. You will get ousted. You will communicate the wrong message. Let's look at choice D. Okay, let's look at choice D, D for delta. Choice D has a very subtle error, or I won't call it a subtle error. It's an error that requires a lot more logical thinking, and it's something that you see in more commonly in CR and RC. The church coined the date February 14th with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia as claimed by a few experts. I'm just going to focus on this part over here. Okay. I'm going to take two sentences. Okay. Put that question in the Q&A pod, guys, not in the short answer pod. And I'm going to actually move the answer choices here because you guys now know what you've chosen. I think, it's ingrained in your memory. Apple is a market leader is claimed by Forbes magazine. When you're making this statement, are you communicating information? Yes. Are you making a claim here? No. You are not making a claim here. You're merely stating a fact that, hey, Apple is a market leader. That fact is claimed by Forbes magazine. Okay. Should you be blamed if it turns out that the statement is not true? Absolutely not. Forbes made that claim. You shouldn't be. You're actually just communicating information. All right. Now, let's kind of look at this. Apple is the market leader as claimed by Forbes magazine. Let's kind of repeat this exercise. Are you communicating information? Yes. Are you also making a claim? Yes. Should you be blamed? You are also making a claim. You're saying Apple is the market leader as claimed by Forbes magazine. What you're really saying is that I agree and Forbes also agrees. You're actually now using Forbes to kind of back up your statement. Apple is the market leader as claimed by Forbes magazine. Okay. The drug is effective as the study shows. Whatever I've said is written over here. The drug is effective as the study shows. You are making a claim. When you tell someone, when you tell your dad the drug is effective as the study shows, you are making a claim on a claim, which means you are also making this claim, which means if it doesn't turn out that the drug is effective, or if it turns out that the Apple is not the market leader, then you need to be blamed. Okay. Spot the difference between is versus as. Okay. Again, remember, this is not a subject matter webinar. In our subject matter webinars, we actually take this to the very thing. I'm not here to teach you this in this webinar. This is something that we teach for a ton of different sentence structures. Remember I said GMAT SC is about learning sentence structures over here. Use is versus as in this sentence structure in any example over there. All right. Steve Jobs was the best innovator, as Forbes says. Again, Forbes is making a claim, so are you. Choice D makes the same error. The church coined the date February 14 as claimed by a few experts, but its celebration on this date is to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial, the more prevalent belief. In this case, in the original sentence, the author was merely communicating information. In this case, for both the claims, the author is agreeing with this. When you say, but its celebration on this day is to do that, right? What you're also saying is that I agree that its celebration on this date is to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. Can you see both the first and the second claim? Now the author agrees with it. A very nuanced thing, but a very, very important thing when you're communicating information. Can you see that? Just focus on his celebration and then go to Avs, and you're going to really see both the things. But its celebration on this date is 2. Okay. Which brings us to the correct choice, which is choice E. Choice E says that the church coined the date February 14 with an ulterior motive to Krishna as the pagan celebration of Lubercelia. That is claimed by a few experts. The author is not making the claim. Few experts are making the claim. But the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated. Okay. Again, the author is not making the claim. The author is merely communicating information that the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated on this date to honor the anniversary of Valentine's Day or burial. Okay. In this entire piece, remember, that's where the aspects are there. It mentions the 2 aspects properly. It talks about claim 1, where the church designated it with an ulterior motive, and claim 2 to honor the anniversary. Okay. And claim 1 is by a few experts. Claim 2 is a more prevalent belief. Yes, sounds weird. Yes, so what? No, it's not required. You're talking about that over here. It's not required over here. You don't need it. Okay. So a lot of people think E sounds weird. Is it correct to start any sentence? Why would it wrong? Okay, let's kind of go back. What's the purpose of GMAT sentence correction? Why do we need GMAT sentence correction? Why is there? Can we say this is a 700 level question? Yes, but why should you be bothered by it? No, it's not to make you miserable. What is the purpose of GMAT SC? No. The person who really said to test your ability to communicate effectively. It's not grammar. Do you think Larry Page was really good at grammar? Do you think Sundar Pichai speaks perfect grammar? No. You're going to be a master of business administration. You're not going to go writing books out there. What do leaders do? What do leaders do? What do leaders do? They communicate, right? Even when you are a manager, you're communicating. Even when you're a director, you're communicating. When you're a vice president, you're communicating. And that precision in communication is what GMAT SC tests. The intent here is not to make you a grammarian. No, a grammar teacher does that. GMAT SC is about meaning and logic. Okay. And by the way, what is grammar? Tell me, why do we have grammar in the first place? In any language, whether it's English, German, Russian, or Hindi. What's the role of grammar? Why does it exist? To relay the information correctly, the reason why subject and verb must agree in number or subject and verb must make sense is why? Because essentially you want to make sure that if the subject is singular, the verb is singular as well, so that the person who's reading it can understand this. But we don't ask ourselves this question. We just say, there's a rule, I've got to remember this. I'm going to just follow this rule. Understand why grammar exists in the first place. It is meaning. Okay? It is meaning. How many of you think being is wrong? How many of you think being can't be a part of GMAT sentence correction? There are 3 reasons why people reject the correct answer. How many of you think being is wrong? It's not. There are official sentences where being is right, and we kind of wrote an article we actually wrote an article in 2012 that because people would start really saying, hey, being is wrong in GMAT sentence correction. Okay. Here is an article. This is something that we wrote in I think it was in 2012 when Shraddha wrote this article, who's going to be 2014 actually. Okay. Why is it that people, and there are companies who really say, I'm going to teach you tricks. It'll help you solve these questions in less than a minute. No, we don't teach you tricks. We deliver results. And we teach you methods. A lot of people think passive voice is wrong. Why is passive voice wrong? Have you heard passive voice can never be correct? On GMAT SC? Have you heard that? Yes. And they will tell you, they'll show you some example and say, hey, passive voice is wrong here. They won't tell you why that is wrong, but they'll say in 85% of the questions, passive voice is wrong, so reject that answer choice. What ability score are you aiming for in SC if you're aiming for that 730 score? What ability score are you aiming for? 90 percentile or higher, okay? Which means you want to be among the top 10%. Are you likely to see a question that is going to be in that 15% of answer choices? Are you likely to see that question which is that rare? If you're aiming, yes! You can use those statistical shortcuts if you're aiming for that 60th percentile, but then you won't be spending your time on your Saturday morning or Saturday evening if you're aiming for that score. Okay. GMAT SC is not about statistics, guys. It's about meaning and logic. The other question, and again, I'm going to take this last subject matter question. I don't like to do this in a strategy session, but yes, GMAT does not test a whole lot of vocab. It requires some basic vocab, but it's not the GRE, it's not the SAT, it's not the ACT. So, and most of that vocab can be built using practice. Now, 700 level question. What does it test? Not grammar, okay, but sentence structure and meaning distortion. It's not grammar. You need to have that grammar foundation, yes, but where choices B, C, and D, all of them were grammatically correct. There was nothing wrong grammatically over there. It was the meaning distortion. And if you don't follow the meaning-based approach, you're not going to be able to do those. Okay. Could you really see just in one example the various sentence structures that exist and how they translate into a meaning? Could you see that? This is what you need to ace. Which is why I say GMAT sentence correction is about mastering these sentence structures. It's not so much about grammar. Okay. To get there, you need to be able to do these questions. A lot of people are saying this is a 700 level question. They were trying to kind of tell themselves it's okay if they haven't answered this question correctly. And yes, it's truly okay, to be very frank, but because you are going to make mistakes on your journey to that 730, 740, 770 score. But when you tell yourself it's okay, what you'd fail to do is learn from that mistake. And failing to learn from that mistake is not okay. Making a mistake is okay. Failing to learn from it is bad. Why? Because then you're going to repeat that mistake. Don't do that. If you make a mistake, spend 10 to 15 minutes on that question. Only then you will not repeat that mistake. Only then you will improve. Okay. So what does it take to get to that 90th percentile? You've got to have the solid foundation. You also need to have that meaning-based approach. And then, even when you do that, you will still have some weaknesses. You need data-driven feedback to refine yourself. And those weaknesses will be different for everyone. Because for each one of you, different sentence structures will actually pose different challenges. And that's where technology-driven feedback is really important. And that's where about those 150 or 170 odd points of feedback just in SC help you with that level of precision. Because only when you get to that perfection in all areas do you get to that 90th percentile score. Okay. Again, these are the number of feedback points that we give. Now, a lot of people think e-GMAT's about videos. No, we're not about videos. We make very effective strategies, yes, but the real strength is when you apply those strategies, how we get to know when you're answering questions correctly and what your strengths are, that is, and what your weaknesses are, because that allows us to give you that personalized feedback and which drives that success. Okay. Here are some case studies, and this is just high-level data over here. There's a guy, Jimmy, who's now studying at Chicago Booth. He scored a V34. This guy is a Chinese Canadian. And clearly, we looked at his ESR and said, man, you need help in CR and RC. We helped him in CR and RC. And essentially, in about 20 days, he was able to go from a V34 to a V42. And you can see how his ability improved in CR and RC. And what was the difference? In CR, he moved from, just not doing pre-thinking to doing pre-thinking, in SC, he moved from not following the meaning-based approach to following the meaning-based approach. It's still the same grammar that he knew. The grammar didn't change. Okay. So here's what he said. Achieving V40 is very difficult by just memorizing and repetition. SC, solid grammar can help you solve easy or medium question, but grammar plus meaning will carry you all the way up to V40 plus. In CR, pre-thinking is a game changer. So again, it's really important to do that. There's a question here. So sometimes I feel that when I look at a question first, my thought is preoccupied by the wrong sentence. How do you deal with it? You actually have a process. That's why you have a process. You extract the aspects. Remember what we did? We really just said, what is it that the author is trying to communicate? We didn't worry about the error early on. And that's very important. Okay. You focus on the process. That's why the process exists. Same thing with Kim. Reading comprehension, she was like, someone asked a question, they said, hey, I'm weak in these topics. What do I do? Focus on applying the reading strategies. Let me tell you one thing. In GMAT RC, the topic by itself is responsible for 10 to 15 percentile. Why? Because when you're familiar with the topic, it becomes easier to read through it. However, even when you don't know the topic, if you apply the reading strategies, if you summarize and attend our RC webinar to understand how do you go about doing that, you will be able to get everything that you need out from that topic. Okay. This girl went from a V37 to a V44, which is 98th percentile. Look at how much she improved in RC in about 2 or 3 weeks, if I remember correctly, or so. Okay. And some of you asked, yeah, you watched Jim's interview? Yes, it's super helpful. He actually he also did a second one for us where he talked about how he applied to Chicago booth and how he cracked both Columbia and Chicago booth, and that was super helpful too. Okay. So how do we give feedback? This is just our subject verb block. Okay. And you can really see how each activity that you do is evaluated over here. This time that you see is the time that you spend. It's not the length of the video, and which is really important. Why? Because unless and until we know how much time you've spent, we don't know how serious you were. And we aggregate this for every student. So for example, if we've taken an hour on this and the median time over here is 20 minutes, we know you paused over there, or you've gone through this twice, or you were watching YouTube videos around this. So this, combining this with this score, allows us to really figure out how serious you are while doing this. And we built this technology in 2014. Over the last decade, we spent about $10 million on tech, just on tech. We build everything on our own so that we can get these insights. And when we get these insights, we can give you feedback. And that's when you make corrections right then and there. So here's an example of the student where he scored 64% in verbs practice quiz, but what you don't know is the quiz post that he scored 100%. This part is actually not visible. Now, what did he do to get to that 100% over here? Okay. He actually revised this question. And how do we know this? We went to his quiz results screen. We looked at the fact that he bookmarked these two questions over here. And that's very, very important to be able to revise those questions. Okay. And here is what this guy said. He says, Sahil, for me, the biggest thing in SC was application of concepts. He took the GMAT 3 and says, for the first 2 attempts, I knew the concepts. I just didn't focus on applying the meaning-based approach. Okay. So with that, I want to thank everyone of you for joining me in this webinar. And again, if you're an e-GMAT student, make sure you have those study plans. Okay. And if you're a free trial student, make sure you take a Sigma X mock, get those starting abilities. Again, I don't think this is something that we are not offering this week, but if you become an e-GMAT student, we can. We usually have this, but because of COVID, our bandwidth first goes to serving our students. Okay. 10 million, it's a big investment, yes, but we've actually been investing more and more in the last year and a half. If you watch the Scholarinium launch, you will see that. But just to summarize, when it comes to the GMAT, get to that score of 730 or higher if you want to get admission from a top B school. The second thing is, to ace the GMAT, you need ability. Build a personalized study plan. It will help you create that path to that target score. Okay. The last piece, there are 4 stages of learning and 1 stage of retention. Make sure you go through those stages of learning. And the last piece is use the feedback very effectively. Okay, questions in the Q&A pod, please. I'd be happy to do that. Let me put the question in the Q&A pod, in the short answer pod, feedback on this session. The pod on the right, feedback on the session, and let me give the session presentation for you. Hold on, where are my files? Yes, session files. Does ISBS accept the GMAT? Yes, it does. And let me browse my computer, get you the session PDF. The session file should be coming in fairly soon. Okay. Can you change the PSP once you've already made one? Absolutely. Yes. How do you sign up for the LMP program? You don't. We sign you up, and if you are in that 680 zone, we can get you in. But Xenia, if you're early on in your preparation, the LMP program is not suited for people who are in that 600 level or so. What's the ideal prep time if you're just starting? Take the PSP, take the Sigma X mock. Only then you'd be able to do that. Again, guys, questions, Q&A pod. I'm going to take those questions one by one. Session on scholarships. Let me actually go to our YouTube channel, and you'd see many people who've gotten scholarships. If you've not subscribed to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'd be able to see various folks who've had scholarships. Look at the playlist. There are GMAT success stories and their MBA journeys. Both of those have stuff around scholarships. Can an average student in quant get 700 plus? Absolutely. Yes. You hit the abilities. I mean, remember, GMAT quant is not about math. GMAT quant is about the same logical approach that you have on verbal. So yeah, attend the session tomorrow. Shreya says, I'm an e-GMAT student. How do you set up a session with a mentor? You don't set up a session with a mentor. Remember this. Our mentors, they are really, really highly trained. The people post their MBAs. You write to us. We provide excellent support. And if needed, we will create a personalized video for you, which will be there for you forever, and to tell you if you're following the right approach. Is the GMAT online good, or should I take the old GMAT online or the enhanced GMAT online? I mean, if you're ready before the 22nd of May, then take the old GMAT online. But if you're going to be ready post 22nd of May, which I think you will most likely be, then take the enhanced one. You won't have the option of taking the old GMAT online. How clear should one be on the target colleges as they start their preparation and their target score? Depends. The answer varies for different people. Some people are not clear at all. All they know is that they want to study at a top school. Some people absolutely know where they want to study, and there's no right answer for the other. I think you should be clear on why you're doing an MBA and why an MBA is the right thing for you at this point. But other than that, you can always figure out the target colleges once you're done with the GMAT. I've started with preparing for the GMAT. Shayak says, I've 8 years of experience in IT. So what score would be effective to get into ISP or a T1 university? 730 or higher should be more than good enough. I think we've had a few students who've done that. Let me see. Let me just see if I can. Here's an interview that I had with a student who's done an MBA after 30. You'd be able to see me as well. Hold on, in this video. So for those of you who don't know me, when you get enrolled for your program, how are you supposed to get feedback or guidance regarding your errors? That's where we built all the technology. Every learning activity has feedback built into it. In fact, the new quant course, which is built on our expert architecture, which is the latest learning architecture that we've done, every module starts with a diagnostic. So the learning, there are about 100 learning paths in there. So the course itself adapts to how you attempt the program. Can you get the PSP without the Sigma X mock? If you have your ESR, absolutely yes. If you have your ability scores, so if you've taken ability quizzes in Scholarium, then yes. I mean, as long as you have an ability score, you can do the PSP. If you don't have an ability score, I don't like to recommend it, but if you know that your abilities are extremely low, okay. For example, if you've taken an official mock and you have a V27 or lower, this means your abilities are extremely low. In that case, yes, you can put a V27 and then you can really say, I don't have an ability score. You will get a PSP that's 80% accurate still. Okay. Can I choose the order in which I want to take the GMAT exam, and do you have a suggested order? Annie, can you choose the enhanced GMAT? With the enhanced GMAT exam, you can. In fact, we are in the process of scheduling a session with the GMAC for the enhanced GMAT online on our YouTube channel. You should see it in another 10 days or so. What is the section order that you should do? And it varies from one person to the other. I have seen people who really start with verbal because they get too, and then do quant because they feel they get too tired. There are others who really say, hey, quant really gets my blood flowing. I love quant so much. And then I tackle verbal a lot better. The beauty is you can practice those Sigma X mocks, allow you to choose your section order. So yeah, you can do that. What is e-GMAT mentorship? e-GMAT mentorship was an R&D program that we, so remember I said, we've invested about $10 million in R&D in building tech. The way we build tech is to make sure that we make you more and more successful, which is why, if you look at just April, we've accounted for 65% of all reviews in April of 2021. Now, how do you go about building tech? You figure out, what's the next place where your students, because of which your students are not succeeding. And that's why we created this program called the mentorship program in January of 2020. Essentially, we worked very closely with about 130 students across 5 months. We invested about 15 hours of our time, $1,500 of our time on each student. And we created hyper-specific plans for that particular student. We didn't charge those students, but we created hyper-specific plans for those students. And 80% of those students who actually followed those plans properly became successful. And success was a very, very high metric, which was a 720 score. And whatever learnings we had from that program, we actually invested those in our Scholarium 2.0, in the new quant course, in creating enhanced video solutions. So we spent on an average about 27 to 2,800 hours every month on R&D, and a lot of that R&D is governed by these experiments that we do. That's e-GMAT mentorship. I mean, one way to look at it is at e-GMAT we are a 40-person company, and we just do the GMAT. Most other prep companies are 5 to 7 people, and they do the GMAT, the GRE, admission consulting. So I mean, we spend at least 20 times as much as others do on R&D, and which is why success comes. Do we offer admission consultancy? We don't, for the very simple reason that our vision, and for those of you who want to really know what our vision is, watch the introduction to our Scholarium session that I did sometime. Essentially, it was actually on Tuesday, just very recently. and you'd really see our vision and where are we investing our money. So here is the recording of that session. Let me get that recording for you guys. And because we are investing, and our vision is to become better than a private tutor, to provide a solution that's better than a private tutor, and we're about a year and a half over there. We're way better than a classroom course. Our results show that we're about 70% as good as a private tutor right now based on our internal metrics. Again, for a diligent student, we are 70% as good as working with a private tutor, and a private tutor who charges $200 an hour. So we're about a year and a half away from getting to that point where we are way better than a private tutor. What kind of leadership roles do B school expect from their applicants? B schools expect leadership. They don't expect leadership roles. Those are two very different things. And I'm going to share an article that I co-authored. It's by one of our partners, and this is an essay that this is an article that you can read. It's a very old article that we did, and you can read and you can understand what leadership means. A lot of people think managerial responsibilities are leadership. That's not leadership. Tapa says, I took a Sigma X mock, I have a PSP. Now should I start with a given subsection? Yes, you should. How do you track your progress? Look at the scores after every activity. Make sure you get 80% or higher. If you don't get 80% or higher, the files will tell you, will give you feedback as to how to revise. What happens after the SC section? Make sure once you do the SC course, make sure you take 3 cementing medium quizzes, 3 cementing hard quizzes, then move on to the next subsection. 640 to 750 plus, how much time? About 120 hours. Arup says, I bought the e-GMAT membership. I'm yet to complete. Don't complete the free trial content, Arup. Start with a Sigma X mock, PSP, and then start with the subsection. The free trial content is for free trial users. All of that is already there as a part of your courses. Is there a software that you can use to create your study plan? If you're an e-GMAT student, you don't need to reach out to a mentor. You have unlimited access to the PSP tool. How clear one should be about choosing the country where you want to do your MBA before writing the GMAT? No, you don't need to be clear. A lot of people are not. How important are previous academic credits? Can I reshare webinar links? Let me actually do that over here. Upcoming free sessions. So here are upcoming free sessions over here. Let me actually hide this. Here's the session on career transformation. Here is the geometry webinar and the SC webinar. Okay, so the geometry webinar is tomorrow. So you can click on register now and you should be able to do that. How important is it is previous academic record getting into a premium B school? It is important, but here's the thing, right? If you've not had a great academic record, but you've done well professionally, and if you have a great GMAT score, you're fine. So a lot of people, when you think about ISB and USB schools, they work very differently from Indian B schools. In Indian B school, everything has a fixed weight, which is kind of very unfair. In most other schools, in general in MBA, we look at a much more holistic way of looking at your records, and we're looking for those bright spots, and we also understand failure happens, and so you're not penalized for failure if you show success post that. So there are people who don't do well academically, but who've done well in their professional life, and they get into Harvard and top schools. As long as you've proven that you can take on the academic rigor, you will get in, and which is where the GMAT is a great way to prove that you can take on the academic rigor. Is it too old to look for an MBA when you're 35 years old? Absolutely not. If you have a good reason, you can do an MBA, and which is where I shared this link earlier of students. I mean, I visited UCLA Anderson some time back, and the oldest student in their full-time MBA class was um was essentially 47 years old. The oldest student in my class when I was doing an MBA was 41 years old. How do you register for e-GMAT? Just go to our buy page and buy the course from there. That's kind of, you know, it's as simple as that. And when you buy, you actually get access to it right away. Pratik says, I've taken online classes from another tutor. I'm taking mock tests but struggling to score in verbal. How can you help me? Well, Pratik, we will have to look at where you currently stand, and then the process would still be to really say what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and then create a study plan for you. It's no different than you having worked than any other student. It's just looking at your strengths and then creating an improvement plan. Okay, let's look at this. Do you recommend the GMAT with no work experience? Yes, the GMAT, yes, with no work experience, but not going for an MBA. I mean, a lot of our students actually take the GMAT and then they apply for YLP, and a lot of students get the GMAT out of their way, um, and then worry about uh, essentially, you know, doing well in their job. So here's a guy who took the GMAT while he was still in school, and lots of students do that, and he got into ISB. Atul says, I'm aiming for ISB. I want to know which admission consultancy. So I can talk about two or three. ISB Mantra is a good one. We've had students who worked with them. They've done really well. You have Nupur with Crack the MBA. She's very selective in who she works with, so talk to her if she's still taking students. Poonam, who's the top rated Indian consultant on GMAT Club. Again, she's also very selective, so you'll have to reach out to her. So my essay review, ISP Mantra, and Crack the MBA are three services that we recommend. Is Sigma X a 3-hour complete 3-hour exam? It's only quant and verbal. It's not IR and AWA. Is it free for everyone? Yes, it's free for everyone. I can share the link. Does it provide in-depth insights? Yes, it provides in-depth insights. It provides really good in-depth insights. How do you get full access? Buy the course. Is LBS a voice choice for a student over ISB? Yeah. I mean, I would say LBS is much better than ISB. I mean, it's not that ISB is bad. Let me just make sure. ISB is a great school, but LBS is very good. Here's again one of our former students who talks about what LBS offers. You can and this guy I think is from Karachi, Pakistan. Will enhanced GMAT program online cost the same as the current? Yes, I think it should. I have not heard anything different. How long can you access the course material? 6 months, and then you can take extensions. But frankly, you know, 6 months should be plenty for everyone. If you're not going to study for a couple of months, let us know. We can put your course on pause. If you're not being able to copy links shared by me, if you are on a mobile device, it could happen. Let me see if I have web links for those. Otherwise, I'm going to create the web links. We don't have web links for those. Let me just create the web links. By the way, let me just share some web links which were there. Here are customer success stories, the ones that I talked about over here. and let me get you links to the session. Just give me one sec. Here's geometry, and as I'm going to start putting the other session links right here. You can click on this. This should be very clickable. Sentence correction. Okay. Do we help in MBA applications? We don't. Ritin says, I'm an e-GMAT student. I've appeared for the GMAT, scored 600 and 590. I need help familiarizing the USA economics, women empowerment. What should you read for the Indian system? No, please, those NCERT textbooks are horrible. First of all, if you're at a 600 and a 590, very frankly, familiarity is not an issue for you. There are other issues. Please share your score with us. Let us give you feedback. Okay, number one. So you're trying to fix something which will start to become a problem when you hit 60th, 70th percentile overall. Okay. So please, Ritin, do not. I mean, it is a problem. It may be a problem, but it's not the problem that you need to solve right away. There are bigger problems that you need to solve if you're at a 600. Let me just say this. And so write to us, let us identify those problems, fix those problems. Now to fix the problems that you're talking about, US economics, judiciary, women empowerment, the place I would send you to is, The Economist, the opinion section over there. Read that. But again, I can send you over there, and then but if you don't know how to read properly, I mean, it's gonna sound like Greek to you. But if you know how to read properly, if you know how to look at comparison and extract the meaning over there, how to understand keywords and understand how they transition from one idea to another, how to understand when is it that the author is communicating information versus when he's backing a claim. So you've got to learn how to do this first. Without learning how to do this, you can read a ton of material. You're not going to find it useful. Ritin, also, your statement tells me you're one of those students who's worrying about timing right now. At a score of 600, timing is not your problem. Even if you answer 25 questions out of 36 questions on verbal and 22 out of 31 on quant, you should be able to get a 650. Okay. So again, you need to solve this problem, just not right away, is what I'm trying to say. But again, if you want to solve this problem, start reading The Economist. Do we provide feedback for AWA? We can. It's just, I've worked with more than 50,000 students. I haven't seen someone come back to me with asking for AWA. Once people go through our CR course and the IR course, they don't feel the need for AWA. Modita has a great question. He says, she has currently at a 620 and she says, shall I build my PSP for 700 first and then for a 760? So Mudita, your thinking is correct. I would build it for 720 first. That way your median ability scores in each subsection that you'd go for would be, I think, much more appropriate, and then 760. Yes, I would do that. So really good idea. Okay. All right, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. It was wonderful being with you, and and I said, I appreciate you guys spending this time with me today. Remember, we have the geometry webinar, and I look forward to seeing you there. We'll have Shweta and Atreya will be hosting this webinar over here. Okay, thank you and have a great day.